Hi friends, this video is going to go over the Lit Theory Intro and Practice slide deck. So first we want to ask, what is literary theory? Literary theory, sometimes also discussed as literary criticism, is a process of evaluating, analyzing, or interpreting literature through different quote-unquote lenses. And the little graphic at the bottom right-hand corner should kind of help explain why we use the word lenses. It is important to note it is a preset mode of interpretation. It can help determine the details you choose to focus on, and in order to create deeper meaning. Because these theories, or again, schools of criticism, used interchangeably, color your understanding, they are commonly called lenses. So why approach literature through a critical approach? It can help enrich personal reactions and evaluations. It helps frames understanding with certain assumptions, kind of helps you organize your analysis and your thoughts. It helps you focus on particular aspects of the work that are important. And it gives you a different tool to view and discuss. What I most commonly say, like why literary theory, is it helps you kind of dig deeper into your analysis of a piece of literature. And it can also help you look at different points of view of a text. It can help you uncover different details, examine different details of a text through each lens. And it'll kind of start to make sense once you start actually approaching literature using literary theory. But again, imagine them as like a pair of glasses or something, which you like, and then you look at a book and like, if you have the purple glasses on, it's going to look slightly different. If you have the green glasses on, it's going to look slightly different. They're actually not really colored, these lenses, but it kind of just helps you focus on different details. So if you look here, for example, we have the image of Marilyn Monroe on the left-hand side, the original image, and on the right-hand side is an Andy Warhol depiction. And in changing the color aspect ratio of this image, different details of Marilyn Monroe's face, hair, things like that are highlighted. So like, for example, in the, first one, the first image, the upper left-hand corner, like her hair really stands out. Whereas in the upper right-hand one, her lips really stand out, right? And so it's having us kind of focus on different aspects of her image based off of these lenses. So there are a ton of different literary lenses, a ton of different schools of criticism, but the ones that we will be focusing on this semester are reader response, gender feminist, psychoanalytic, biographical, historical, and structuralism/formalism. For our first unit, we'll be really focusing on gender feminist, psychoanalytic, and historical. Those are the first three lenses that we will be learning about. So our core ideas: criticism uses theory to create meaning of a text. You have to remember that we, the readers, discover or apply theory. The authors themselves don't write using theory. So we use theory to create meaning. There are a ton of different kinds of theory. Again, the previous slide kind of showed you some of the different titles. It's the word theory, criticism, lenses, they're all kind of used interchangeably. And that every theory has specific principles that determine the details a critic emphasizes to produce criticism. So again, you'll be focusing on very specific elements of each text when applying a lens. And again, it's implied through its selectivity of details. Every theory has limitations of meaning. And last but not least, and I know I've already said this, we apply theory. The author does not use theory. We, the critics, we, the readers, we apply theory. So here are our first three lenses or schools of criticism or theories. I say the word lenses the most. So here are our first three lenses of study. The first one is psychoanalytic, which this approach focuses on the psychological motivations of characters. If you are someone who is interested in psychology, then you might like this lens a lot. The next one is gender, sometimes called feminist theory. I use gender feminist. This approach is a subset of the sociological approach and examines images of men and women and concepts of feminine and masculine in myth and literature, and also the presence or absence of men or women or female or male characters in the story. And then last but not least, we have historical. This approach focuses on the connection of the work to the historical period in which it was written. And then you also actually can consider the historical period in which you were reading it. Literary historians attempt to connect the historical background of the work to specific aspects of the work. So if you like history, you might be interested in that one. So for psychoanalytic, our first one, here are the key questions. It doesn't mean that you necessarily have to find answers to all of these questions when you are reading a piece of literature through a psychoanalytic lens. These are just kind of guides to help you apply that theory. So the first one you want to consider is how do we see repression in the text? What is repressed in the text? It could be symbolically, it can be literally. Are there repressed desires or dreams? Does that lead to insecurities or fears or doubts or paranoia? So repression, systems of oppression are going to be like kind of the first one that we look at. Sorry, repression, not oppression, repression. The next one we want to be asking is, what are the patterns of behavior in the character or in the characters? You can also consider the narrator sometimes. Which behavior of the character or characters are conscious and which ones are, subconsciously happening? What do the characters' emotions, behaviors reveal about their psychological state? Like, are they erratic? Are they calm? Are they eerily calm? Like, you want to be thinking of these things. Can the character's behavior or motivation be explained psychologically? Is this behavior a product of the culture that they are around? You can also be looking at like symbolism. So what dreamlike symbols can be identified? What do these suggest? And we also have to remember that dreamlike doesn't always mean happy, right? Could be nightmare type symbols as well. How does the work reflect the writer's personal psychology? How does the reader's own psychology affect his, her, or their response to the work? So this is where we actually have to do a little bit of like background on the author and kind of connect their background with the text, but again, only if it applies to the psychology of the text. And then we also want to look at conscious or unconscious conflicts between characters. Are they there? If so, how so, et cetera, et cetera. So these are just some guiding questions to help you with psychoanalytic theory. For gender feminist, again, I use those words interchangeably. So we want to be thinking, what are the stereotypes that depict women or female characters in the story? What are the stereotypes that depict men or male characters in the story, or feminine and masculine? Does the work challenge or uphold these stereotypes? You also want to be wondering if there are any like characters that maybe are the opposite of the stereotypes. Do they break their stereotypes? If so, what might that be suggesting? The other thing we want to be thinking about are the behavioral expectations of our characters, whether they're masculine, feminine, male, female, that kind of idea. So what are the behavioral expectations? Do they follow them? Do they break them? And what effect do those expectations have? My personal favorite thing to look at with gender feminists are actually like power structures. What power structures are present in the text, and I encourage you to really think about what these power structure titles mean. So social, economic, political, physical, those kinds of ideas. So you want to be thinking about power. So what power structures are present in the text? So off of that, how do the male and female characters interact with one another? Who has the power and what does that power look like? You also want to be thinking about how the male characters interact with one another and have those same questions, and the female characters as well. So when they're mixed and then when they're the same, what does that power look like? And it's really interesting too when you can see that, like, with male and female characters, sometimes like a character will have power in that dynamic, but then when they're placed in another dynamic, their power is shifted. And so that's interesting to look at as well. With all three of these, you also want to be thinking about In addition to what does that power look like, is it a source of conflict, and is it resolved by the end? And then lastly, do any themes of the text address issues of femininity or the female experience, and in what way? And I think sometimes people get confused about that. So you want to be thinking about uniquely female experience, like unique female, things that are unique to the female experience. Things like birth, childbirth, motherhood, those kinds of ideas. And then last but not least, we have historical lens. So what is happening in history during the time period in which the story is written? Because as we know from reading literature, authors will often write a story in a time period and set it in a different time period, right? So what is happening when the story is written? Consider major conflicts, societal structures, etc. This may involve light research on your behalf. And then what is happening in the history during the time period in which the story takes place, or the setting. Again, these can be, not always, but they can be very different from when the story is written. What historical background is relevant to the story, and how is it significant? Does the text support or reject particular political or societal movements? How does the author use the text to make commentary about society? This is where you get to do a lot of analysis. So a lot of the other one is identification. This is where you get to actually analyze. Are they making a claim? Are they making a statement? Are they in support of? Are they rejecting? This is where it gets kind of fun. What types of language or characterization or events are portrayed? Especially when we think about societal movements, oftentimes we can look at the way characters speak to one another, or even don't speak to one another. Those kinds of ideas, how they behave, how they act. Is it a reflection of the historical time period? Is it, are they going with society? Are they going against society? So what claims can be kind of derived from that? Does the text address any political, social concerns, historical events, figures, documents, literary texts, or belief systems? So this is where things like allusions can be really, really helpful as a literary device when applying this literary lens, because the author might allude to certain things that are real, that would kind of help clue you in on what's happening in the time period. So that's the last lens. As you can see from these, different lenses, oftentimes they kind of work together. This is, again, why we say that we apply the lens, because it kind of helps us focus on a specific element. So you could look at the same symbol, right? You could have a symbol, I can't think of anything off the top of my head, but you can have a symbol that you would approach from a psychoanalytic lens and have a very different read than a gender feminist lens, and then have a very different read from a historical lens. And it can be the exact same symbol, but how you're reading it and answering those questions, looking at that symbol can really change the theme. It can change your understanding. It can change your analysis. So you want to be thinking about how, not only how do these lenses work independently, but also how they can kind of work together to deepen your understanding of a text. And that is literary theory.